Tonight, switched at birth. An astonishing mix-up at a Manitoba hospital discovered after 67 years. Two lives upended.
How do you grab the wrong baby? I need to get my identity back.
Thought I was born French Métis.
Families forever changed. Dramatic new audio of U.S. fighter pilots targeting that flying object over Lake Huron.
The size of it, it's just so slow and so small and you can't see it.
The suspicions and the search.
The terrain is extremely rugged. It is extremely remote.
And when love is in the AI.
I feel like when you write it yourself, it comes from the heart, whereas when you use AI, it's a bit lazy, you know?
Valentine messages. Humans versus chatbots.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. We begin with the incredible story of two men who lived each other's lives. They were switched at birth in a Manitoba hospital and only found out 67 years later. Now they're dealing with so many questions on how it happened and their own identities. CTV's Taylor Brock on the sudden and jarring shift in their reality.
How do you grab the wrong baby?
Eddie Ambrose and Richard Beauvais were born in Arborg on June 28, 1955, but they went home with the wrong biological parents.
I got to heal this torn heart of mine, which it's not going to be easy.
Ambrose says he grew up with a loving Ukrainian family, but it wasn't until the sister he grew up with and her daughter dove into their own DNA that his sister learned something was wrong.
The DNA came back as you have a brother, but your brother is in BC.
That was Richard Beauvais. A later DNA test confirmed Ambrose was not her biological brother.
If it was just me at the beginning, I found out about this switch and nobody else knew about it, I would have just burnt the papers. I would have carried on quite happily who I was and what I did.
Beauvais grew up being a proud Métis.
The funny thing about all that is I never realized I was proud to be Native until it was taken away.
Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand says many people like Ambrose are learning they are Métis and want to connect with their heritage. He says they will connect Ambrose with 60 Scoop survivors supports and help with legal efforts if needed.
Utmost priority for us is let him first build with his family, give him the time he needs. Our office is ready to work in there.
Ambrose has begun meeting his biological siblings, including learning he went to school with a biological sister, and another sister walked past his house in Winnipeg almost every day. He and Beauvais have yet to meet in person.
What I've lost in the past, that's what I would say I was robbed at.
He's hoping someone will acknowledge the mistake made at the hospital 67 years ago.
I need to get my identity back. I need to prove who I am.
The men say they haven't met yet, but they hope to in the future. They both say that they're frustrated no one has taken responsibility. Now, the province says that it didn't run the facility at the time, and the local health authority says it can't comment on personal matters. Omar?
What a revelation to have to deal with. CTV's Taylor Brock in Winnipeg tonight. American intelligence now says the leading theory about the three flying objects that followed the suspected spy balloon is that they pose no threat, and that has some questioning whether taking them down was worth it. The U.S. Air Force says the cost of the four shoot-downs was more than $2.5 million. And tonight, for the first time, we're hearing cockpit audio from one of those missions. CTV's Judy Trin reports.
Two fighter pilots closing in on an unknown object flying over Lake Huron.
The size of it, it's just so slow and so small and you can't see it.
Moments later, one F-16 pilot fires a $500,000 missile, but misses.
So I'm going to call it like a container. I can't really tell though what the shape is. Definitely smaller than a car.
On the fourth one over Lake Huron, first shot missed, second shot hit.
This former fighter pilot says the right precautions were taken.
Firing after these balloon-type objects over water necessarily ensures that no one's going to get hurt on the ground.
The obliterated wreckage may have landed in Canadian waters. The Canadian Coast Guard is using an icebreaker and launching an underwater remote vehicle to search a 10,000 square kilometer grid. The search in the Arctic is just as challenging, requiring helicopters and an RCMP search team.
The terrain is extremely rugged. It is extremely remote. The temperature is approximately minus 25 degrees Celsius there, and there's heavy snow.
The White House now says it's unlikely 3 objects downed over Alaska, the Yukon and Lake Huron, are linked to China's spy balloon, which was first targeted in a missile strike 10 days earlier.
They were very much smaller than the Chinese spy balloon, in cases about the size of a car. They did not appear to have any maneuvering capability, so they didn't look like they were piloted.
But the objects were deemed dangerous because they were floating in commercial airspace.
What is very clear is they were a threat to civilian travel, to commercial airliners.
Today, Japan said it's also been targeted, that since 2019, China has sent balloons to spy on that country's sensitive security sites at least 3 times. Omar.
CTV's Judy Trin, thank you. Turkey's president now says last week's earthquake is the deadliest since his country's founding 100 years ago. More than 35,000 people have died, and word today one of those victims is a 33-year-old Canadian woman from Halifax. Samar Zora was doing doctoral research in anthropology in Antakya. There were also more incredible rescues today after spending 212 hours. This 77-year-old man was pulled from the rubble. But as the rescue phase comes to a close and shifts to a recovery, the focus now is changing to helping people struggling without shelter and food. And an update on this newborn baby who got worldwide attention after being pulled from the rubble in northern Syria. Baby Aya, which means miracle in Arabic, is now being guarded by police after several people falsely claimed to be her relatives. Gunmen stormed her hospital last night, but the baby, an orphan, is okay. More than 7 million children have been affected by the earthquake, according to the United Nations. Canada's Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly made a surprise visit to Kyiv today to discuss how Canada can step up its support for Ukraine. This comes on the same day NATO leaders met in Brussels, where no decision was reached on Ukraine's renewed appeal for fighter jets. CTV's senior political correspondent Glenn McGregor reports.
The Foreign Affairs Minister made a surprise visit to Kyiv today, meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky at the presidential palace.
My appreciation for all your support. Thank you very much.
And thank you for taking the time to have this conversation.
A recognition from Ukraine's leader of Canada's contribution of financial and military support, including 4 Leopard 2 battle tanks. Shown in new images from Poland today of Canadian troops training Ukrainian soldiers. At a meeting of NATO defense ministers in Belgium, Anita Anand said more equipment will come.
And that's the approach that Canada has taken from the very beginning. Make sure we are doing whatever we can to support Ukraine with whatever aid we have that it needs.
Having secured tanks, the big ask from Ukraine is now for fighter jets as Russia ramps up its air war.
What's that?
A request its defense minister emphasized with his handkerchief. Without new jets, Ukraine relies heavily on its artillery. New video showing a barrage decimating a column of Russian armor. But NATO is concerned that Ukraine is using shells faster than suppliers can make them.
They need to provide more ammunition and also how to ramp up production and strengthen our defense industry to be able to provide the necessary ammunition to Ukraine and also to replenish our own stocks.
The warning comes as the Ukrainian military braces for a renewed Russian offensive sometime this spring.
We, all of the partners in the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, have been working hard to ensure that they have the armored capability, the fires, the sustainment to be able to be effective in creating the effects on the battlefield that they want to create.
There's no decision yet from NATO on the request to supply fighter jets, which is still seen by some member countries as a potential escalation, Omar, of a war that shows no signs of ending.
All right, Glenn, thanks. The woman who was the face of Donald Trump's decisions on the world stage before she abruptly resigned as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations will now run against him in 2024.
I'm running for president.
Nikki Haley has become the first Republican to challenge former President Trump. She was the first woman and person of color elected as the governor of South Carolina.
I was the proud daughter of Indian immigrants.
She also dug into her competition.
I don't put up with bullies. And when you kick back, it hurts them more if you're wearing heels.
Haley reversed course from a 2021 promise she would not run for the White House against Trump. Political inaction on gun control in the U.S. was at the heart of rallies today, exactly 5 years after a horrific massacre at a Florida high school. Despite nationwide protests that followed the Parkland shooting, bullets continue to fly. This afternoon, 4 teenagers were rushed to hospital after being shot outside their Pittsburgh high school. And it comes less than 24 hours after a deadly mass shooting at a university in Michigan. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon reports.
Run! From panicked calls to sheer terror, students at Michigan State University running for their lives.
I heard people screaming they're shooting, and that's when I began to run.
Locked down on campus, barricading themselves for hours while a gunman hunted them down.
Scared. I was scaredest I've ever been in my life.
The 43-year-old suspect shot himself, but not before murdering 3 promising young students. 5 more were critically wounded. The head of the hospital overwhelmed.
So many people that just came in.
The shooter's motive is still a mystery. A note in his backpack threatened other schools, but investigators say he had no connection to this campus. His father said he became evil angry after his mother died, and with a criminal record, he said his son should not have had a gun.
Because a random person just going on campus and just killing people. This stuff needs to stop.
Today, Florida students mark the anniversary of the Parkland school massacre. 5 years ago today, 17 students murdered in a matter of minutes.
This country has a disease of gun violence, and people in position of power are doing nothing.
Alea Eastman knows the fear. She joined other survivors rallying at the White House, saying this generation has had enough of watching their friends die.
Active shooter drills and more police on campuses, those are just Band-Aids on the real solution. The problem in this country is guns.
And with more guns in America than people, tonight U.S. President Joe Biden is pleading once again to do something to stop the carnage, calling for another ban on assault weapons. Omar?
More shootings in America than the number of days so far this year. Joy, thank you. Canada's Ethics Commissioner is recommending all federal ministers and parliamentary secretaries receive training from his office after another Liberal MP was found violating the rules. The commissioner says Quebec MP and Parliamentary Secretary Greg Fergus breached the Conflict of Interest Act when he wrote a letter to Canada's broadcast regulator in support of a Francophone multicultural television channel's application for mandatory carriage in Quebec. Friends, family, and dignitaries gathered in Mississauga, Ontario today for the state funeral of one of the country's most recognized and revered politicians, Hazel McCallion. An honor guard carried the casket of the longtime mayor on what would have been her 102nd birthday.
She will always be remembered as someone who worked hard and delivered every day for people.
Ontario's premier shared what he told her before she passed.
I took her hand and offered her as much comfort as I could. I told her, I love you, Hazel.
Hazel McCallion died peacefully at her home last month. Time for a short break, but when we come back.
I could go down south pretty quick right about now. I just got to get my car to the airport.
The big dig after a fierce winter blast. Plus, facing the music, artists struggling under the weight of crushing costs. An onslaught of snow made for a messy morning in Nova Scotia. Meteorologists say 30 to 50 centimeters were dumped on Cape Breton. Some schools were canceled. And in some parts of the province, this has been the biggest storm of the season so far. Canadians have been weathering the inflation storm now for months. And tonight, BC Bureau Chief Melanie Nagy takes a closer look at how the soaring cost of living is hurting musicians trying to stay afloat.
Jamming in preparation for a spring tour, one that's been years in the making for members of the 80s band Strange Advance.
This year we're doing our 40th anniversary of Worlds Away, our first album.
But getting back on the road is getting very pricey.
The demand is there, the venues are there, but it's just that cost.
We have to transport huge amounts of gear, and it's very expensive.
The tour, originally scheduled for early 2020, was delayed by pandemic shutdowns. Since then, high inflation and the rising cost of living have dramatically changed the band's budget.
It would be, 30 to 50%, increase in costs.
They're grappling with the soaring price of gasoline, venue rentals, accommodations, and even food.
I used to pay like $10 or $15 for a main dish, and now it's like $25 or $30 some places. It's nuts.
It's not just musicians. Independent studio owners and producers like Lynn Gardner are feeling the pinch.
It's one of those industries that is hard unless you're at the very top echelon, the Grammy kind of elite.
Gardner still has business coming in, but she's cutting back on her overhead to stretch profits.
It's quite typical for studios to leave their equipment on. Much more mindful of that these days. I'll turn the equipment off so I'm not running up hydro bills.
Festival organizers and promoters are also being hit. In BC alone, several major events have either been canceled or are on hold, all citing increasing production costs as the reason. Despite their expenses, Strange Advance isn't passing extra costs onto their fans.
We'd like to keep it under $50 a ticket. Realistically, they should be $75 a ticket.
They hope their upcoming tour will not only sell out, but at least break even. Melanie Nagy, CTV News, Vancouver.
Under a cloud of uncertainty, the Canadian Football League has taken over control of the Montreal Alouettes. This marks the second time since 2019 the team is operating under the league's watch. The CFL says multiple parties that reside in Montreal or elsewhere in Quebec have already expressed a, quote, serious interest in buying the team. Still ahead, new details about a close call in the air. The flight that nearly hit the Pacific Ocean. The world's largest democracy is facing accusations of launching an attack on press freedoms. Today, Indian government tax officials raided BBC offices in New Delhi and Mumbai, just weeks after the British broadcaster aired a controversial documentary about Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which India banned. Here's CTV's John Venavelli Rao.
Outside the BBC's offices in New Delhi, the gates were closed and journalists gathered to watch as Indian tax officials conducted a search, slammed by some on social media, including the opposition Congress Party's General Secretary, who said it reeks of desperation and shows that the Modi government is scared of criticism.
This series tells the story of Narendra Modi's troubled relationship with India's Muslims.
It all comes after the British broadcaster released a documentary last month critical of India's Prime Minister Modi, a Hindu nationalist who back in 2002 was Chief Minister of the western state of Gujarat, at a time when there were riots that killed hundreds of Muslims, a documentary the government harshly slammed.
We think this is a propaganda piece designed to push a particular discredited narrative.
Even though it only aired in the UK, India invoked emergency powers to block it from being shown in the country, even arresting university students who tried to watch it on campus.
This is a complete violation of all kinds of, democratic fundamental rights of every citizen of this country.
In London, some members of the Indian diaspora gathered outside the BBC to protest the series. But such actions made others want to see it even more.
If it is hidden, if it is banned, then sure there might be something important in it.
No individual. But a spokesman for Modi's ruling party suggested this had nothing to do with the documentary, while others see it as another troubling sign in India of media censorship and authoritarianism. John Venavelli Rao, CTV News, Toronto.
The National Transportation Safety Board in the U.S. is investigating a very close call on a United Airlines flight that almost plunged into the Pacific Ocean. Shortly after taking off from Maui in December and reaching 2,200 feet, the plane suddenly dropped to 775 feet in just 20 seconds.
I can remember looking out, and then I really thought I saw just a glimpse of the ocean, and I thought, what's going on?
Fortunately, the plane was able to regain altitude and continue on to San Francisco.
I think we just kind of chalked it up to this is like the worst turbulence that we've ever felt.
The airline says its pilots reported the incident, and United coordinated with the FAA and the Airline Pilots Association, which resulted in pilots getting additional training. After the break, pitting true love against artificial intelligence. Could you tell if a love letter was written by a computer? It seems that chatbots like GPT are slowly taking over the world and now honing in on Valentine's Day, helping ease the pressure for those who get creative anxiety writing romantic love letters. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin hit the streets of one of Canada's most romantic cities for an experiment.
In the heart of Montreal, we set out to track down romantics, those who could tell true love from the artificial kind. We found Kim and Bobby, newly married on this Valentine's Day, and asked if they could tell a human-crafted love letter from one created by artificial intelligence with a chatbot like ChatGPT.
Really?
Yeah.
Probably not. Probably not. No,
I would, yeah. So I know the way you talk.
Okay, so we put others to the test.
I'll be here waiting for you, ready to fulfill all your dreams.
I'm here waiting for you, ready to fulfill all your dreams.
AI.
What gave it away?
It's too much.
Over the top.
Not sentimental.
You are thoughtful, kind.
A lot of people confuse robot from Lovestruck. You're thoughtful, kind, and funny, and smart, and we're lucky to have you in our lives. Love, Mom and Dad.
AI?
It's a person.
Oh my God, I'm horrible at this.
In fact, a survey of adults in 9 countries found 69% couldn't tell the difference, and 26% planned to use AI to pen a love letter this Valentine's Day. It was quicker, easier, they said, and they didn't think they'd get caught.
If something sounds a little awkward, it sounds a little weird, then it'd be human, you know?
This man's significant other better not try to fool him. I'm so glad you're my Valentine and I love you.
Seems generic, I'll say AI.
He could tell each time in a heartbeat. And many said if they did find out it was AI, they would be heartbroken.
I love showing love. We don't have enough of it.
Is it ruining Valentine's Day?
No, I don't know. I still feel love in the air, so I'm good with that.
The message, he says, is that traditional or high-tech, sending love is cool. Happy Valentine.
Thank you.
Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
Nothing beats writing from the heart, but maybe I'm old school. That's a snapshot of this Tuesday for all of us at CTV National News. Happy Valentine's Day. Thanks for watching and good night.